page 41, where the Ramah says that the whole issue is if you steal wool and you make strings, he says, the whole provision of we said over here, what's a problem is if you steal the wool, if you steal the string themselves. But if you steal the wool and you make strings, it's kosher. To be outside the mitzvah, right? That's the Ramah. But he says, but l'chadchila, even that you shouldn't use. So let's see Lamed, and then we'll do the Be'er Halacha. Ksherim. So the Ramah says that if you steal the wool and you make strings, it's kosher. Now it's interesting. You have two things. You have shinui. Torah says shinui kona. When you alter something and it's no longer its original state, you acquire it. But the Taz says it would not be sufficient to be yotzei. Why? In addition to Yiyush, the owner had to despair. The kinyana biyush ushin rushem. It's a combination of two things. There's Yiyush, there's despair of the owner, and now it's taken on another identity, another classification. Before it was fleece, now it's a string. The mikorit sem of hashtachutin. Let's stop for a moment. We had said if a person steals bullion and you mint coins, so you made a change, a very significant change. Before it was just silver, now you minted into coins. The thief is ikona. Does he acquire the coins? The halacha is he doesn't acquire the coins, even though he altered it. It's a very significant alteration because it could be smelted and be restored to that original bullion. That's called shinui achos l'briyos. So the shinui, the alteration, could be restored to its original state. That's not called a change. Now, what happens if, in addition, that's a situation, the victim, the one who was victimized, is miyayish. Under normal circumstances, if a person steals something, the owner despairs, the thief cannot benefit from this despair, because his obligation to return it preceded this despair. What about if the thief now would sell it to a third party? The third party could acquire it. Of course, the third party who's taking it from the thief, it's entering his domain after the yush, and he never had an obligation to return it. Right? So the thief himself cannot benefit from the yush, because his obligation to return it preceded the act of stealing. But the third party, where he enters his domain after the yush, he can't keep it. It's called yush shinu rishus. Now he says something. There's a nesivus on this. He says it this way: when you alter something, who's going to restore it to the original state? The owner. The man originally had silver. You go and you convert it to coins. So why is that change considered significant? Because the owner, when he receives it in return, he'll restore it to where it was when he originally had it. What about if he despairs? If he despairs, even though the thief cannot benefit from the despair, but factually, the alteration becomes a permanent alteration. You following? Because the owner is not seeking it out any longer. So therefore, the change that the thief made, the alterations, is going to remain permanent. Even though physically you can, but who's going to restore it to the original state? Only the owner. But if the owner despairs, he's not going to make that change. So therefore, the change that took place is considered permanent, sufficiently permanent, and therefore the thief is able to acquire it. So that's the Taz. The Taz says if you take fleece and you spin it into thread, the halacha is you're only a kona if there was yush. In addition, why? Because otherwise it could be restored to the original. He says, "Konya biyush v'shini Hashem." Shini Hashem means it's taken on a whole different classification. Before it was called fleece, now it's called a string. The mikorit tzemer v'ashtechutim. Aval Mogar Avram Chosav. The Mogar Avram argues with the Taz. The mistam medusosim Ramo, because the Ramo writes it just without giving any specifics. It seems to be mashvirlei da'afil kodem yish kosher. That the thief, if he spins it into thread, even before the owner despairs, it's sufficient to acquire it. The konyo b'shini maseh. The act itself is sufficient. The alteration. Now the question is, why isn't it considered shirechos lebrioso? The answer is not simple. Once you spin something to thread, it no longer will have the texture of fleece. Right? So could be that's sufficiently considered a permanent change which cannot be restored. Vim gozel chutim b'chorin la'achar lifnei yush. Person steals strings and he sells to a third party before the owner despairs. Even it's unbeknown to the buyer. The Jewish bookstore buys stolen goods, and he buys it before where the fence, he fenced it from the thief. The owner did not yet despair. Okay? Lo yotza sheni b'at tzitzis. It's understood. The one who purchases it, if he buys it before Yush, so what's the halacha? He has an obligation to return it. Even though he's unaware it was stolen, does make a difference. Right? Even though it changed domains, but without despair, he can't acquire it. What about after it came into the domain of the second one, subsequently the owner despairs? It's not going to be any good. Because the obligation to return it preceded the despair, even for the second one. What about the bookstore only sold it after the original owner despaired? There's no question. The buyer acquired it. He's even permitted to say a brocha, mashma, me'agod avram, the simul tofresh, mitesif kon beis. Yuchal levorech bazeh. He's even permitted to say a brocha on it, even though the origin was stolen property. I understand, but still, its origin, see, it's not appropriate. Factually, it was. Legally, you're permitted to keep it. But to use it for a bracha, for a mitzvah, maybe not. Mogar Ram says, since it's not mitzvah b'averu, because fully, legally, you have the right to retain it, you could even say a bracha. Kemchu lo gozal, because he's not the one who stole it. Chem posga machsashek, chem prim god misham b'shem elavush, mach mizeh, prim god besides Levush. Levush was a student of the Ramah, who's machmed that you should not say a bracha. V'gam atasim chofei v'agrosha machmir mizeh, you should not say a bracha. Even though monetarily, legally, it's yours, and you yotzi the mitzvah, saying a bracha is something else. We had earlier regarding checking tzitzis. Remember, every day you put your towels and you check your tzitzis before you say the bracha. So they all discuss why. There's a chazokah. Yesterday tzitzis were kosher. So why should you have to check? We rely on chazokah. So one of the reasons given is because bracha, you mentioned Shem Hashem, chazokah is not sufficient. It's not sufficient. Saying the name Hashem in a bracha, it's another level. So similarly here, even though legally, monetarily, it's yours, but to say a bracha on something that its origin came from a tainted source, it's not appropriate. So therefore, the vast majority say, even though there was shinu, even though there was a change of domain, there's yush, you have everything, it's not sufficient. Yotze, you'll be yotze the mitzvah, the bracha should not be said.
I would have thought that this concept of chazaka with the checking of tzitzis is not a good argument, because people check the tzitzit when they put it on, just before they put it on. But people don't check the tzitzit when they're putting it away.
Still.
There is so many things that could happen.
Good. So he gave three reasons. One of the reasons was what you're saying, that it's very often, it's inevitable your tzitzis get caught or whatever it is. Yeah. You're right. That's one of. But he offered a number of reasons. One of the reasons is it's covered bracha. For instance, just reading. Mishna Berura says, you're not permitted to say bracha with your head uncovered. Megiddo Rosh. What happens if you did say the bracha? If you did say inadvertently, you said Shemona Esrei, you didn't realize your head wasn't covered. You have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. So Ramosha Feinstein and the Chazon Ish, and they all say that standing before Hashem bareheaded, that itself is disgraceful. Even if it's done inadvertently, Shemona Esrei has no value. You have to repeat the Shemona Esrei.
That's every bracha?
Every bracha in the Shemona. Oh, wait. So what about the one in bracha? What is one Yosei the bracha? Not Shemona Esrei. Shemona Esrei, you have an audience. What about an ordinary bracha? Even an ordinary bracha, if you say it Begili Rosh, with your head uncovered, it has no value. You have to repeat the bracha. These things happen. See, a regular bracha, it happens. Especially in the morning, it happens more easily. You're walking out, you want to say Asher Yotzar. And very often, you just put the yarmulke on your head. And and you put it on, 3 words into the bracha. You know, a person in real, he's half asleep, he's saying Asher Yotzer, puts it. So he said Baruch Atah Hashem, but at the 4th word he already had the Amk on his head. He's not going to be Yotzer. He said Hashem Hashem with his head uncovered. He has to begin over again, say the bracha over again. Has no value.
Why?
Because it's Begilu Rosh. He said Hashem Hashem Begilu Rosh, with his head uncovered.
Now, with respect to despair, what happens if something is stolen from a person? The person ultimately despairs. And then sometime later, the person learns that this object is in such and such a place. I'm thinking now, for instance, the Nazis stole art from people during the Second World War. Those people despair.
So we
They were in
discussed this. We
concentration
discussed it. We
camps, and now
discussed
they
it.
find out it's hanging in a museum.
It's based on the machlokas. It's an argument between Rashi and the other. If despair is, it becomes instantaneously ownerless. Once it leaves your domain, it's gone. That's Rashi's position. Others say no. Despair only means that when you're in a state of despair, a third party has a right to take it. But if you no longer despair, then it remains secure in your domain. Then the person cannot take it. So the question is, when the Nazis took it, right, or whoever took it afterwards, let's say the Nazis took it. That was, I told you the story many years ago. It was Kristallnacht. The shuls in Germany were burning, and a person ran and saved the Sefer Torah from the Aron Kodesh. The owner definitely despaired. And after the war, it became known that his family told the story, and turned out the original owner wanted to reclaim the Sefer Torah. It's my Sefer Torah. So the person says, but good, for all intents and purposes you believed, it went up in ashes. It was incinerated. Therefore, you despaired. When that synagogue was burning, you despaired. Does he have an obligation to return it? The psak was he had no obligation to return it, but l'mana sholom, for the sake of doing the right thing, he should be returned. But based on the laws of despair, he had no obligation to return it. But there, somebody had taken possession of it, and he took possession of it. That was his intent, take possession of it. But the Nazis, they cannot benefit from despair. Let's say you found it in their warehouse, right? Doesn't make a difference. It's still considered. And it may be ownerless, but nobody took. But if you hold like the vast majority, that you have to take possession. Nobody took possession of it, unless you say the moment the war was over, the Allied forces, they became the owners of all that property. That was the spoils of war. Once that becomes spoils of war, it doesn't belong to the original owner any longer. Anything that's in those warehouses.
You know, you have to verbally use, or you just...
If there's an Anand Sadi, let's say a ship goes down, you don't have to say, I despair.
But why would you ever despair? Why would you...
It's just the reality of the person. The verse is Vayakhel kiss. Woe to me that I lost it.
Yeah.
Right? You realize you lost your wallet in Times Square, New Year's Eve, and say, you're not finding your wallet. It'll be a miracle to find it. Woe to me, why did I have to bring a wallet? It's gone. That sense of despair, and you verbalize it, it's gone. That's called Yush. There was a story many years ago, somebody had associated with Yad Avram. Didn't know much about Yiddishkeit, but he was a very proud soldier in World War II. And he was in Munich after the war. And they went into his headquarters, where he would, and there was a table there, must have been about 80-foot granite table, and that's where they'd have his meetings. And he had where he would sit, and it was guarded by sentries, by MPs, that nobody could pilfer, should take any of the property. There was art in there and other things. People would want to take property. And this guy, Marty Silverman, comes in, and he had a sledgehammer up his sleeve, like the story with Eglon. Gideon, he came with his sword, and he came in with a sledgehammer up his sleeve. He goes to the head of the table, and he takes it out, smashes it on the table, exactly where Hitler sat, breaks off a piece of granite. Like he vented his anger, they couldn't tolerate it. The moment he did that, the MPs picked up their guns. They were ready to kill him on the spot. They would shoot him. It's government property. How do you have a right? And somebody was there, an officer says, he's a Jew. And once they said that, they didn't shoot him. Otherwise, they would have killed him. The moment it's under, it's spoils of war. You have no right to touch it. So, if that's the case, Whatever way you learn Yiddish, it's already been acquired by a third party.
What's his last name?
Marty Silverman. Marty Silverman, at that time, when I knew him, he gave the largest cash donation to UJA in the history of UJA. $10 million check he wrote for UJA. He was an old man. He was already in his upper 60s at the time. He used to come years ago to say Kaddish at Fifth Avenue Synagogue on his yard site once a year. Yeah. Okay, let's see the Mesusa Sharm.